reason why I said yes to my first biographer, Blair Stonechild is the head of Native Studies in Saskatchewan at First Nations University in Regina. He knew my family, my dad. He speaks Cree. I knew that he would get certain things right that no other biographer would ever get right. So I was very, very grateful. But it's not a music book. Blair is a great historian, and it's quite a historical book, a bit dry, yes? But then Andrea, it's totally the opposite. It's fun, it's funny, it's rich, it's artistic, it's poetic, it's beautifully written. So they're very different books about the same. My manager called up and said, "Oh yeah, somebody else wants to write a book about you." I said, "Oh God, no, who, what?" He said, "Her name is Andrea Warner," and I said, "Just say yes."
That was it. Just that easy.
Yeah, because by that time I had read her book about Alanis Morissette, Shania Twain, Sarah McLachlan, and Celine. Yeah, and
I mean, you're just going down the list of iconic women that Canada has been a part of.
It is a little tricky, though, the combination of show business and a mission. Yeah. It's a little tricky, because most people in show business are like most people in sports. They just want to do their thing and make a lot of money and, overcome whatever they're trying to overcome in their childhood, And yet some people in the arts have had a mission. And for me, the mission was kind of first. I never expected to get into show business. I had a degree. I was a senior in college at the University of Massachusetts. I had a degree in Oriental philosophy, a degree in education. And I found out 3 weeks before I was supposed to graduate that they weren't going to let me graduate. I said, "What?" I had straight A's. I was one of the 10 most outstanding seniors in my class. But I was told I couldn't graduate because in freshman year, there had been a compulsory course, and I had aced it. And if you aced the speech, you were exempt from taking the class, but they never told my guidance counselor or me that we would have to make up the credit during those 4 years. So I found out 3 weeks before graduation that I couldn't graduate. So I thought I had been on the way to India to go to a college where Mahatma Gandhi had been teaching. And instead, I wound up in show business. And although I never got to go on that mission to hang out with the creator in the creative arts, I took the same mission into show business. So really, I never expected to last in show business or be a big deal. So I wasn't that disappointed when it kind of fell apart. But when I found out 20 years later that I had actually been blacklisted, that's a different story. Now you stepped on my intelligence,
that's
you
right.
know?
Yeah. For me, was about alternatives and students. Students were saying what was on our mind. Everybody in the sister played a guitar, and we were talking to each other. Caffeine was the drug, and I think it was an incredible, incredible time of spontaneity and sharing and communication. They were trying to tell us, however, that there was no war in Vietnam. And a lot of us knew that there was, or we believed that there was. There was a night when I was traveling. Somehow I was stranded in San Francisco airport. And I had a morning flight on the way to Toronto, where I had an engagement in Yorkville at the Purple Onion, which was, you know, kind of a hippie place, a student movement kind of center. And it was the middle of the night, and some soldiers came in, wheeling their buddies on stretchers and wheelchairs. And I mean, these guys, I'd never seen anything like that. These guys were all bandaged and shot up. And I got to talking to some of these soldiers, and they knew that there was a war. But what it did for me, it made me question, well, who is responsible for war? I mean, is it these guys? I mean, you can't just point your finger at them, although they were there. Or maybe it's generals, you know, maybe it's the generals who make a career of telling these guys what to do. But maybe that doesn't go far enough. I mean, who tells the generals what to do? Who points the generals and the army at somebody else? It's the politicians. But here I am flying on the way to Toronto, and it had to go farther. By the time I got to the Purple Onion, I said, who elects the politicians? It's us, right? His orders come from far away no more. They come from him and you and me. And brothers, can't you see? This is not the way we put an end to war. So it's about individual responsibility. He's 5'2", and he's 6'4". He fights with missiles and with spears. He's all 31 and he's only 17. He's been a soldier for 1,000 years. He's a Catholic, a Hindu, an atheist, a Jain, a Buddhist and a Baptist and a Jew. And he knows he shouldn't kill, and he knows he always will kill you for me, my friend, and me for you. And he's fighting for Canada, he's fighting for France, he's fighting for the USA, and he's fighting for the Russians, and he's fighting for Japan. And he thinks we'll put an end to war this way. And he's fighting for democracy, he's fighting for the Reds. He says it's for the peace of all. He's the one who must decide who's to live and who's to die. And he never sees the writing on the walls. But without him, how would Hitler have condemned him at Dachau? Without him, Caesar would have stood alone. He's the one who gives his body as a weapon to a war. And without him, all this killing can't go on. He's the universal soldier, and he really is to blame. His orders come from far away no more. They come from him and you and me. And brothers, can't you see? This is not the way we put an end to war.
Oh, I tell you, after almost every concert, somebody will come up and say, I just loved you at Woodstock. You were so good. And I wasn't there, and neither was Joni Mitchell.
No.
So, and I just saw Joni not long ago, and that was one of the things we talked about. He said, everybody comes and compliments her on how good she was at Woodstock. She wasn't there either. Gosh, from the time I was 3, songs were popping into my head.
You were at the piano at that age, right?
I was at the piano, yeah. I'm self-taught. Like many musicians, I never learned how to read music, and I only found out a few years ago that I'm actually dyslexic in music, even though I'm a biblioholic for text.
Right.
I read everything. I can write for an orchestra. It's not as though I don't know how, but I can't read it back the next day. And, I'm trying to get the Junos interested in doing maybe a 2-minute little video on all the great musicians who were shunned and shamed in school music classes because they couldn't read European notation. Yeah? You can't read music, you can't be in band. You can't be a musician, you can't read music. I mean, Eric Clapton, Jimi Hendrix, Chet Atkins, Wes Montgomery, some amazing musicians. Never learned how to read, but it didn't hurt their playing.
People oversell education as one thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, but it makes money.
That's it. It's just a business.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I always compare it to like when my son was born. I woke up in the hospital and my baby was born, and I wanted to breastfeed my baby, but doctors didn't know anything about that. There's no funding into colleges by I mean, where does the money come out of breasts? There's no money in it. So it's kind of the same thing.
But it's different.
There is?
Oh. Yeah, there is. Yeah.
It's a different industry.
It's a different industry altogether. Yeah.
Live and learn it.
Yeah.
Exactly. I knew I could make it better. What we're talking about, Georgia, The Virginian was a 2-hour. It was the first 2-hour movie series for TV. And they wanted me to take a role as a young Indigenous woman coming back from having gone to school back east. And I said, well, you'd have to fatten up the part. And, of course, I would like to have all of the other Indigenous parts played by Indigenous people. And they said, oh, come on, that's impossible. Oh, maybe the featured roles, but, we've got Italians and Jews and Armenians and people from all over the world. And this is professional movies. I mean, we've got makeup and we've got costumes. And I said, no, it's more than just the look that Indigenous people bring into the room. It's more than just hair and makeup. It's a whole cultural experience, and if you have not had that experience, can you imagine if The Sopranos had not been done by people who were familiar with the entire cultural feel of, Italian-American family? Right. It wouldn't have been nearly as good. So Andrea's right. What I was going for, it wasn't a power move. I just thought that we could make it better, and I turned them on to my friends in Hollywood. There were over 25,000 Native American people living in Los Angeles. I turned them on to Jay Silverheels, who's from Six Nations, by the way. He's Cayuga or Seneca, I think. Anyway, he and Lois Red Elk, who's from Montana, they were running an Indian Actors Workshop. So what I did was make that connection. I wasn't trying to tear anything down. I enabled them to do something better by showing them something that they hadn't known.
When you look at where we're at today and you hear the conversation around change, how do you sit with that?
Well, in the first place, I think it's important, what you just said. Bad leadership, there's nothing new in that. Bad leadership, misogyny, the profit motive and greed, controlling by fear. This goes back to before the Old Testament, folks. To before the Old Testament. This is the model upon which oppression has been structured for thousands of years in Europe. Again, this is why Europeans wanted to leave Europe, right? We've come through it before. Sometimes it was a bloody mess, like Hitler, right? But, I was there when Nixon was doing his thing, and people were, when nice people were afraid to say anything, and when young hippies were just, disowned because they dared to say something about Lyndon Johnson, businessman Lyndon Johnson.
That's right.
I mean, his whole Vietnam War, the business. Yeah. That's what we have to understand
they kept
in
that
Canada
war going.
today. The whole business model upon which North America is run, and most of the world, It's wrong. It's wrong. Take as much as you can get and give the least you can. That's wrong.
Do you think it's going to change?
the only time Jesus ever got mad, right, is when he threw the money changers out of the temple.
That's right.
And I'm kind of in that perspective as you ask the question.
Right.
Yeah, so I did see that happen. I wasn't really a part of the civil rights movement, although I was friends with Stokely Carmichael, Muhammad Ali, Dick Gregory came to my reserve, and he was crying in Saskatoon, by the way, about misogyny. When you go to Saskatoon, ask about it. There was nobody paying any attention to Native American rights. Nobody ever even thought of it. Oh, the Indians, they vanished. Oh, it's a sad story. Oh, they're all gone now. Oh, move on, right? But Peter Paul and Mary, Pete Seeger, Joan Baez, Bob, they never showed up for any of that, nothing. Pete Seeger expected me to stand there on a stage and sing, "This land is your land, this land is my land." And meanwhile, Charlie Hill, he made a version of it. He said, "Yeah, this land is my land. This land used to be my land. This land is your land." Right? Right. You can't...
They wanted you to be there for them, but they weren't there for you.
Yeah, but not because they wanted to be mean to Indians. It just never crossed their screen.
Right.
I never saw so many business suits. Never knew a dollar sign could look so cute. Never knew a junkie with a money Jones. They singing, who's selling pie place? Who's buying boardwalk? These old men, they make their dirty deals. You go in the back room and see what they can steal. Talk about your beautiful but spacious skies. It's about uranium. It's about the water rights. Got Mother Nature on a luncheon plate. They carve her up and call it real estate. Want all the resources and all of the land. They make a war over it, blow things up for it. The reservation out at Poverty Row. There's something cooking and the lights are low. Somebody's trying to save our Mother Earth. I'm gonna help them to save it and sing it and pay it, sing it. No, no, guess you can't do that. No, 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 guess you can't do that. 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 No
Ended up doing that on Sesame Street. Imagine that. Like,
Yeah.
imagine that conversation on Sesame Street, what that would have been like.
Oh, it was nothing. I was feeding my baby, off camera, whenever he needed to be fed. I asked him, I said, have you done anything on breastfeeding? And similarly to when I asked them, have you done anything on Native American programming? They said, oh, great idea, let's do it. And it was not controversial at the time, no problem. But now, doggone it, now it's controversial. Somebody will put it up on YouTube and somebody will take it down. Yeah.
And it's under a minute.
Serious.
Like it's a 1 minute clip, with you and Big Bird, and it's so effective and it's so simple. There's nothing overwritten about it. It's just totally normal.
Well, at the time, my song Codine was being attributed to Donovan anyway. So is Universal Soldier.
Right, yes.
Maybe not him, but his managers, and they never corrected anybody.
Hopefully you got paid for Universal Soldier. If you did, then that's okay.
Oh, no, the Universal Soldier I gave away for $1. You got to read Andrea's book.
No, I know, but it's better if you tell the story than I tell the story.
Well, no, but back to your first question about opioid addiction. When I was first starting out, I was in Florida, and I'd had bronchitis. And I was also mourning the death of someone. Anyway, I was feeling kind of low, and the people at the coffee house, it was the one that Freddie Neal in Coconut Grove was running, as a matter of fact, they sent me to a doctor who started giving me pills and shots. Every day, come on over and get your shot. I thought he was giving me B12. I got into a car with some friends. We were going to Atlanta. As a matter of fact, we were going to see someone related to Howard Zinn. And I went to a pharmacy and I said, I just feel so terrible. I need to fill this prescription. He said, I can't fill this, it's from out of state. And I said, I'm feeling terrible. And he said, he asked me how long I'd been taking this. He said, you're addicted to this. And I said, what? And he told me that it was codeine. And I said, codeine? I thought that was, 222s and cough syrup. He said, no, it's an opioid. It's the same as heroin, morphine, and all the modern doctor-dentist drugs that everybody's addicted to now. So I wrote a song called Codine. So it's not as though I was strung out on the streets by choice because I had too much party.
But you see how easy
it was an assault by a doctor.
Well, this is it. And you see how easy it is for people to get, and not everybody. It's about understanding, right? Everybody sees somebody with addiction and says they made that choice.
Yeah, but now, the terrible thing that's out there now, it's a terrible, horrible lesson. A lot of fine people have been addicted by their doctors to something that they can't quit. Yeah. And it's terrible. I was very sick with it, So and I did get through it, and I just encourage anybody, try to get through it. Just try to get through it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But Andrea, to George's point, I think it also plays into what we're going through today with Truth and Reconciliation. As I cross the country back and forth, and I'm playing for a lot of Canadians of all different backgrounds, and I think a lot of people at first, they heard about Truth and Reconciliation, and they mistakenly thought, oh God, here come the Indians, they're going to shove it up our nose, how terrible we've been. No, that's not what reconciliation is about. Native people have been resisting for 500 years the same damn things that made Europeans want to leave Europe in the first place. We're all on the same side here. I mean, the feudal system, the pecking order, whoever has the most coins rules, the Inquisition, the Roman Empire, the serial killers on the thrones of Europe. These were terrible, terrible oppressions. And Native people are in the same position with trying to do away with the same things that Europeans were trying to do away with in early history. So I think, there's a little bit of room to think of it in that way.
Slick. You investors in hate. You Saddams and you Bushes. You Bin Ladens and snakes. You billionaire bullies. You're a globalized curse. You put war on the masses and then you clean out the purse. And that's how it's done. War after war. You old feudal parasites. You just sacrifice the poor. You got the cutting-edge weapons, but your scam's still the same as it's been since the Romans. Oh, as a patriot game. That's a war racket. the war racket. That's the war racket. That's the war racket. You twisters of language. You creeps of disguise. Your disinformation is like worms in your eyes. You privileged bankers. You gambler thieves. You profit on war. Less money in peace. So that's how it's done. Time after time. And country after country. And crime after crime. You pretend it's religion. Like there's no one to blame. For the dead and impoverished. In your little patriot game. Honey, that's the war racket. That's the war racket. That's the war racket. That's the war racket. You got the world's greatest power. And you team up with thugs. Make a fortune on weapons. Destruction and drugs. Bunch of flags and boots and uniforms. Start to all look the same. When both sides are playing your little patriot game. And that's how it's done. And you've got our sons in the crosshairs of horror at the end of a gun. And your national anthems, they start to all smell the same when all sides are playing in the patriot game. That's just the war racket. 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 And war's never ever holy. It's just a greedy man's dream. And you two-faced crusaders, both sides are obscene. War's not made by God. War's made by men who misdirect our attention while you thieves do your thing. And that's how it's done. About every 30 years, the rich fill the coffers, the poor fill with tears, the young fill the coffins, the old hang a wreath, the politicians get photographed with their names underneath. That's the war racket. 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 That's the war racket.
We know that the government and the president of the United States would write letters praising radio stations that blacklisted you and didn't want to play people in the Indigenous movement, never mind just protests. So there was an active effort by the media and the government to shut down the story of you.
Yeah, there was, but I didn't know what was going on for maybe 20 years later. You know, it's not as though they say, hey, guess what, you're under surveillance, we've got files on you. When I finally saw those FBI files, I told my lawyer, I don't have any FBI files, I've never broken the law, I didn't smoke pot on the White House lawn, I didn't do anything, particularly startling, positive or negative. But sure enough, there were 31 pages on me, and all they proved was that I had never done anything. And yet, there were letters in the files I remember one from a woman who had written, asking about this Sainte-Marie character, finding out if I was guilty of something. They wrote back and they said, we can't tell you what's in the files. We have 31 pages on her, but we can't tell you what's in the files, which kind of leaves a suspect aroma in the air, so it's kind of weird. Yeah, but it's not the government that does that. It's a couple of guys in the back room of a certain administration. And so often in Canada and in the U.S., probably other countries too, we tend to say, oh, I hate thy country because... No, it's not your country. It's an administration. It's a handful of guys who pretty much for 4 years will do what they want to do and what they're being paid to do, by the guys who support them. So it's quite partisan, and it kind of takes the wind out of it in a way, I think, the government hates me. No. That's a big cobra. That's a big snake. Nobody can deal with that. But no, it's just a couple of wormy little guys in the back room who make nasty phone calls to the media. But it's not difficult. There's not a lot of effort in it. There's effort in it when you're disappointed because you didn't pull it off, because somebody just didn't get it.
But did you face a lot of resistance?
Probably less than you would think.
How do you
No,
know?
it's just a mess. Sometimes you just have to.
So
you just
how
have
is
to
that
have the courage to figure out where the door is, go in and ring the bell and talk to the guy. Big difference. I mean, for such a long time, I've been the only Indigenous person in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not as though that's a great burden or a great weight, but gee, it sure is nice to have some people who already know the subtext, you know. And I don't know, it's just nice to have company, you know, like-minded thinkers in the room at the same time. It's not just where you come from and how you look. It's how you feel and what you've been through and what you bring to whatever it is you're trying to change. By the way, had you noticed that at the Junos, probably the same one that Ian's talking about, you know, they asked me to open the show just before Tanya Tagaq and Tribe Called Red came on. And they gave me a script, and it was the same old politically correct script, you know, we are in the territory, unceded territory of the whoever's for millennia. Yeah, yeah. So I said, I'm not going to read this. So I made some phone calls. I called some local Aboriginal leaders and elders, and I said, here's how I want to change it. The word unceded, in the first place, unceded is lawyer talk. It means it stops you for a minute. What the heck is that? It means unceded. Is it a tennis match and you didn't, you know, yeah. Is it how you're ranked? Is it unceded? You don't have a chair, you're unseated, you don't have a seat? I mean, what the heck is it? It slows you down. And then millennia. Who says millennia? Millennia? Why don't, so I changed it and I said, we are in the unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin people, who for thousands and thousands and thousands of years have looked after this territory. I think it's important, but I think it's important to put it in the vernacular language that everybody will understand. Yeah. So if you were to change it the same way that I did and say unsurrendered instead of unceded, and to say thousands and thousands and thousands instead of millennia, right? You know, get in touch with me and I'll send you the details as to exactly who gave me that green light. And when you say things like people really talk, you embrace more people.
Yes.
And it doesn't seem like, oh, now we have to go stand up and do a formality.
No.
No, now you're talking about us instead of whoever.
If you focus so hard on the current administration, it's easy for people to get lost in it. But if you do any historical digging at all, you'll realize that presidents have behaved this way a long time.
Yes.
And so this isn't really that new. The only difference is now that they're operating in the public, and maybe that's significant.
And one thing I think we have to remember in Canada, you know, the music industry, for instance, the white music industry has hundreds of thousands of people getting paid to be in it and to do a great job and to pump it up and make it bigger. The black industry, a smaller number, but a similarly huge impact.
Yeah.
Latino industry, we don't have an indigenous music industry. And we are what, 2% of the population, I think? Is that it? I think 2% of the population? We're a tiny minority. We're no threat. We're no threat. We have so much to give, and it's so hard to give it. Yeah? I mean, our Indigenous artists have been struggling for years. Now, happily, we're hearing about at least a few of them, but not nearly enough.
Right.
But even with the Polaris Prize, I hear people say, you know, it says, oh, they're going to give it to another Indian, you know. Oh, they're all alike. You know, but listen to each of our albums.
Yeah,
you know,
it's so much variety, and that's the thing that's
totally
so like
different.
It's different music entirely,
and each unique.
So unique.
And one of the lovely things about the Polaris Prize, though, is that they do reward originality, whatever color it. I mean, it happens to be these guys right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's something to be said too, just to the reality of the indigenous arts. Many of my fellow artists in the indigenous community have kind of grown themselves.
100%.
Yeah, it's not because your cousin, you know, had an in with the record company, you know.
Yeah.
You know, so congratulations to the Polaris voters for continually rewarding excellence and originality.
also not bound by rules. It's not like, oh, I don't play this kind of music. Like, how could an artist who was a folk artist in a scene that was very serious about folk, they were pissed off at Dylan when he plugs in, and you're like, I'm going to make I'm going to work with electronic sounds, way before anybody even knew what that really was.
And I didn't really care.
Yeah.
See, I didn't think I was going to last in show business anyway, so I thought I might as well have as good times as I could have.
This is the number of times you've said to me, I didn't really care.
No,
I think, honestly, I think that's like a big factor in a lot of sort of this idea of just getting to do what you wanted to do. Well, of course.
I was still trying to get to India.
Yeah.
I still haven't been.
You still, come on, seriously?
I still haven't been.
I'll go with you.
On behalf of APTN, I'm very pleased to be here tonight to present the Indigenous Music of the Year Award to Buffy Sainte-Marie.
Oh, thank you, everybody. Kichimigwech. Thank you so very much. To my co-producer, the great Chris Burkett. Thank you, Chris. True North Records. Paquin Entertainment. Dracaris. Stephen McGrath. Eric Alper, who really got this album to people's ears. And most of all, really, you know, this is the 25th anniversary of this category. And I really want to acknowledge with my whole heart Curtis Johnny Shingoose and Elaine Bomberry, who really are responsible for all of these coming our way. And as for myself, I think that maybe this Juno needs to live with Elaine Bomberry here in Vancouver. So Elaine, this is for you, with many thanks from all the Indigenous artists in Canada who keep on writing, providing all kinds of music, traditional music and all the rest of the genres. Thank you to you all. To everybody who's nominated, all the previous nominees, you get so little credit. Thank you everybody for acknowledging us. Thank you especially to Gord's family tonight for saying what was in so many of our hearts. Kichimigwech, everybody. Thank you.
Whether you're a woman or whether you're a man, sometimes you got to take a stand. Just because you think you can, you got to run, you got to run. Whether you're a woman or whether you're a can see yourself a winner beyond the money and the greed, beyond the prizes of pure untested need. And to be a champion is more than luck and speed. His power and freedom in the spirit of the wind.
Thanks both of you for taking the time. Really appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
For sure. Through inaction, by allowing administrations to behave this way, are the people not responsible for their government? So that I know that they go, oh, well, we didn't elect this person, but both Canada and the United States and many countries around the world have generations of this behavior, and many generations, we know about it. So if we don't raise our voices, are we not then responsible for the behaviors of, Justin Trudeau buying a pipeline, Doug Ford canceling sex education, Donald Trump being the white supremacist that he is? Like, are we not responsible for that as the people?
Right on.